This is Blogger Girl, and you're watching Murder Metal Mayhem.
Welcome to Hornseye Studios. I'm here with Blogger Girl, and she won the contest. What's happening, Blogger Girl?
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
It's awesome and good to have you here. I like your background there, unfortunately, of the house that's no more. But yeah, so you won this contest, and so the contest was you got to pick the topic, and we do this video together. And so, what was the topic of choice for you?
For me, it was the Idaho 4 murder cases. I just have been fascinated with it since the beginning, and that's how I found you. I was watching your videos on the Idaho 4, so that's what brought me in. That's why I definitely wanted to talk about it more.
It's unbelievable how people get so fired up about this case. I mean, it's got all the nuances of just an exciting, captivating story. You know, you got the police corruption, you got the frat boys, you got the, four, good looking young people, college students. I mean, it's just got all the ingredients for a fascinating story, and you got the surviving roommates, and you can go down some rabbit holes with this one. So I was not surprised that you picked it. When I said that you could pick any topic you want in true crime, I thought, boy, what if somebody picks some really off the wall topic that'd be kind of hard to discuss for more than 5 minutes. So when you said Idaho 4, I'm like, all right, we could be doing that one for days if we wanted, but we're going to keep we're going to keep it brief, because the viewers here for Murder Metal Mayhem, they like the short videos. Now, just so you all know, this is not 666 seconds. I don't even have the timer out, which normally I do to keep myself on task, but we're just going to talk about this topic. So this is a list of some topics we're going to cover, because, these guys want it organized, and they want to, their usual staying on task here. So these are the topics that we're going to cover based on our meeting that we had before the show. And so we're going to talk about the issues with the prosecution. We're going to talk about that recent hearing that just happened. We're going to talk about those cowboy cops, Blogger Girl, because that is an interesting thing that Drip Drop is where I first heard about the cowboy cops, but good stuff there. And sealing and unsealing the evidence and the gag order and all that nonsense. We're going to talk about that, and then we're going to finish it up with the theory that I floated out there called "lambs to the slaughter." So those are the topics that we're going to cover here today. So if you guys want to know what we're going to cover, that's it. And so let's start out with that first one there and talk about the prosecution. So what did you want to talk about at first with this?
Just the different things that I've noticed that I guess started me realizing that maybe there was something amiss here. I think it started for me personally when I saw them entering the house without proper PPE. Which is the protective equipment that they go into the scene with. What do they call it? Something suit. It's a Tyvek. The term Tyvek suit, and usually they suit up completely before. There's a lot so I watched another show where there was a gentleman that does this for a living, and he is the crime scene orchestrator. He basically manages anyone who comes in and out of the scene, and he was explaining what he does when he gets to the scene. And he's like, I want a record of everyone that already has been in the property. Right. So that he knows who to exclude from any kind of DNA or anything like that when they've arrived on scene. He has a log. He says no one goes in and out of the property without his permission first. Right. And as you saw, that wasn't the case. No,
that was the furthest thing from the case in this one. I think if we watched the same one, he even went as far as to say he gets shoe impressions. Even
Oh,
could be
yes.
DNA from everybody. So this way, like you said, you
Hmm.
can rule them out and not be
Right.
chasing down, something you don't need to chase down. So,
I agree. And that was something I didn't see them doing from the very early on. You saw them with no gloves, touching things, going in and out of the house. And we'll touch upon that again with the cowboy thing that we're going to touch on.
right.
Because they did the same thing. And so that's where it started for me. I always like to believe in the police. I try
Me
to be
too.
a very, law-abiding citizen. So that really bothered me. I don't know about you.
Oh, it bothers me tremendously. I've mentioned before, my dad was a parole officer for 20 something years. And so he was in that law enforcement field. We have a guest co-host on Murder Metal Mayhem, Tex, who's from Texas, and he's a prison guard down there. And so we talked to him. And, I've got personal friends and family in law enforcement. And it upsets me. I don't want to think that they would do that sort of stuff. But when they act so shady, like
Oh
with
my
this
gosh.
case, my God, I mean, they don't do themselves any favors. I mean,
Right.
it's one thing after another. I mean, I've never seen anything quite like it, really.
Yeah. I
Other
mean, I
than
think the big,
Delphi
yeah.
and Idaho
Ugh.
4 are about neck and neck, honestly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's another whole case I can't even wrap my mind around either.
Right.
As far as like the main hurdle I think they're gonna have is like one of them is the changing of the years of the car. For me, that felt very weird. You have the whole
Right.
Bureau of FBI behind you
Right.
and the state authorities as well. And I'm like, how do you have three law enforcement agencies and you
Right.
guys get the year wrong? I mean, they do it for a living, especially the
Yeah.
FBI
That one
specialist.
guy
So
was like a 30-year expert that did that analysis at the FBI.
right.
So how the hell is that guy getting it wrong,
And that's I guess that's where it started for me was like I started to question it. And at first, when I first heard this case, and I think we both talked about that, we both felt the same way at first. It was like, well, if there's DNA at the scene, slam dunk, he did it. And
Right.
that's how I felt at first. I was just like, whatever. Why are you guys making this a big deal? Like,
Right.
if his DNA is at the scene underneath one of the victims,
Well,
he did this.
when I did the interview I did yesterday with Cluminati, she was talking about that she's done some research on the probability of DNA on brass, because that snap was brass. And
Hmm.
what she found was that the touch DNA would not last more than 4 hours on brass. So if you're talking about an 8-hour delay, I would think that's about out the window. And even if you were to just be ridiculous and say, okay, well, let's start the clock from when 911 was called, Brett Payne didn't show up until 4 o'clock. So you want to tell me that
Well,
that lasted? I mean, that's very suspicious. I had no idea of that. I think
mhm,
that really puts the DNA evidence in the trash can at this point. That's
I
planted
agree.
evidence. I mean, that could not have been done under normal circumstances, because according to what she's found out, it wouldn't have lasted that long.
Wow. And even
Yeah.
if it was planted, how would they get his DNA 4 hours before they have to plant it? If that's the case?
Right. Well, remember, they didn't talk about the knife sheath right away. So we don't know when the knife
Mm-mm.
sheath came into play here. And I doubt we'll ever see body cam of evidence of how they collected the evidence. I mean, partially
Mm-mm.
because it was an incredibly gory scene, but this thing has been cloak and dagger the whole way. I mean, they haven't been forthcoming of anything, and I doubt they're going to change course even in the trial. I think they're going to still try to be as, under the covers with this as they can, because if the covers are lifted, I think these guys all look like a bunch of crooks in
Absolutely.
some kind of crazy scheme. I mean, it's beyond me why these guys would do this. It really
Um,
does, other than, the university wanting an outsider to pin this on so they don't look bad. They sure as hell don't want a drug hit as their cover story of what happened here, because a
no.
parent's not going to send their lovely young, college student off to a place where drug
Right.
hits are going on. So to me, the image is key here, and the dollar talks. And to me, that's why I think that they pin this on the outsider. You know,
It's just sad. I just don't know how they got to Brian though.
right?
That's why I still can't figure that out. And when we talk about the motion hearing, Anne said that herself as well.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see where this goes.
Yeah, but, I've got some ideas when we get into that stuff. But you know,
absolutely.
Bill Thompson and Judge being U of I graduates, and Taylor's a U of I graduate. I mean, the Chief Fry is a U of I. I mean, this entire town is full of U of I graduates or people that work for the U of I. And then they would shrivel up and die if that university left town. So they need that university. So it's a hand in glove type situation, in my opinion, with these two acting in concert, because the end result is they need this off the table and pin it on somebody who's not affiliated with them to keep the money coming in for the university. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. I think that's the commonality. I mean, that's the interconnectivity between all of them too.
Right.
And
right.
It's just bizarre. It's so bizarre. All the and you've made those points in your videos, how they've all kind of connected somehow. You always find that connection, and for me, that it blows my mind still to this day. And I don't know how fair he's gonna have of a trial, not only in this town, but I mean, even with Anne being a graduate too, I mean, is she going to do, she seems like she's doing her best to be his counsel.
But when you see what's going on in Delphi with those defense attorneys, oh my gosh, I don't think she's doing nearly enough, but it's obviously a different case in a different state, and I get that. But they're both under gag orders. I mean, there's a lot of similarities, but yeah, I agree. I have some concerns about Ann Taylor. I wonder if she is truly going to bat for him, or if she's just leading him to the gallows and holding his hand while she does it and rubbing his back as they put the noose around his neck. I mean, that's kind of the impression I get at times with her. But we'll see. I mean, hopefully that's not the case. I mean, it'd be nice if some hotshot lawyer did this pro bono and stepped in, because I really think this guy needs a vigorous defense to go after all of this crap. I mean, we know how the OJ case went with DNA evidence, or with the evidence they collected at the scene, you know, chains of custody, people putting stuff in their trunk overnight. I mean, ridiculous. And the defense attorneys just tore them apart on the stand. And that's the kind of stuff that we need here, because I can't imagine that any of this stuff was collected the way it was supposed to be. I just have my doubts, because nothing they've done, in my opinion, seems right. I mean, carrying their belongings out of the house, nothing wrapped in plastic, mattresses thrown in the back of a pickup truck. I mean, did they truly search those for all the DNA that could have been on that? I mean, I have my questions. I mean, seriously, it's a three-ring circus out there. It's ridiculous. And if somebody's life wasn't hanging in the balance here, you know, it would be almost laughable, but it's not, because it's so disgusting what's going on, in my opinion.
Yeah. And then you got to remember, why was Chief Fry driving the U-Haul? I've never seen a chief go to a crime scene and drive a U-Haul.
No, it's ridiculous. No, it's ridiculous. They hire experts to come in there and clean those scenes. I've done training for people that have done that for a living, and yeah, it's a business, you know, that cleans up crime scenes. They take all the stuff out, and it's done all, you know, like Tyvek. They're in Tyveks and respirators because it's hazardous. And they're wrapping everything up, and it's not done like the way they were doing it with the U-Haul and the cops doing it. I mean, that just looked really, really strange to me. So,
kind of like, what are you doing here?
Right.
And then you got the house coming down. That was another thing that they were really pushing hard for that.
Right. Yeah, they were pushing hard for that. I didn't understand
why. Like,
no, both sides were pushing for it, which is weird, you know.
And they kept saying, "Oh, the town wants to heal," and I'm like, "How are they going to heal? The trial hasn't even happened yet."
Right.
That doesn't make any sense
And
to me.
they're not gonna heal if he gets acquitted because they don't have anything
Right.
legit, you know. And then what do you
He
do?
just gave fodder. He
Yeah.
just gave them fodder.
Yeah.
To get it thrown out, and then
Exactly.
touching on the Tyvek and like I'm thinking, is there asbestos in this house?
There was.
Because
There was.
I didn't see anyone wearing protective gear or
No,
masks
there
or
was
anything.
lead. There was lead and asbestos. I mean, that's the field I used to do training in. So when I heard about that,
Right.
I was very, I was concerned, or just wondered what was the asbestos in, because it could be in thousands of things. And I didn't find the report available online. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. So I have
Right.
no idea what was found to contain asbestos, but I certainly had my concerns. And the lead-based paint looked like, from one of those shots of Bethany's window, the way the paint was, they call it alligatoring, which is the way it starts to break down. It looks like long rectangular pieces, and that's indicative of lead. So my guess was that there was lead paint, at least on the windows. But in Illinois or in other, Midwestern states, you're required to, remove those things before demolition.
Wow.
But yet in this case, I didn't see any of that being done, because like you said, I didn't see anybody go in there. We would have seen that on the news of, the trucks pulling up with the asbestos abatement stuff or the lead abatement stuff. And I didn't see any of that. And even the demolition crew, I didn't see anybody there wearing a respirator. And,
Right.
and here in the Midwest, I mean, that's a requirement for all the crew to be trained and wearing the proper respiratory protection because of that dust. And I didn't see anybody wetting the dust down, and that's a thing here too. So though I had all sorts of issues with the demolition, I did a video on it because of the fact that that's kind of the field I used to be in and know a lot about it. So, but
Exactly.
anything else on the prosecution before we move into that hearing?
Let me see. Just that there's the one piece of evidence connecting Brian, but nothing else. And
Right.
so it's like, how can that be definitive that it's him? I mean, nothing was found in his house, his car, his office.
Right. Pretty tough
it's
to
just
do.
bizarre to me.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But as far as that, I mean, those are the main things. There's obviously so much more. I mean, like we got the key bar at Sigma Chi. Did they test that one? Like, you don't know.
I guarantee you they did not. I mean, the fraternities, I've heard, they're under strict orders. Like if something was to happen to anybody in that fraternity, like a incident law, police involved, they have steps they go through. And the first thing is call the attorney. Don't talk to anybody. Don't let anybody in. They completely shut it down. So that's not a surprise to me that, Sigma Chi in this case, would not have allowed them to even come in there without any sort of real evidence that there's something there to go look for,
Absolutely.
And I also wonder, because of all these U of I graduates involved in this case, were any of them Sigma Chi members? I have a member of the Horns High Club, Justine Cooper, who has been doing some digging into that and not really finding anything, even going through like yearbooks to try to see if we could find pictures of them pictured in Sigma Chi. But I think that this is all intertwined, and so you have to wonder, is that a part of it too? Is they don't want to put any attention on the fraternities because, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, that makes the school look bad. And if the school looks bad, then maybe people aren't going to go there,
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
So I know you watched the hearing. I watched some of it too. What were your thoughts? Just kind of general thoughts on it.
You get my high level notes for that. Just to kind of run down for people who maybe didn't see it.
Sure.
They had a closed hearing earlier in the day, a couple hours before the 1 p.m. hearing. That was about the grand jury. That was secret. The judge touched upon it. Like that was the first sentence out of his mouth for the second hearing. And he said that they're streaming it now on their YouTube channel. So it's not through the media anymore. So he's making that clear to everybody. If you don't like being on camera and you're in the galley, you might want to leave.
Right.
When I was looking at, the only downside to that is that the imaging was not clear for the galleys, so you couldn't really see the prosecution or Anne and Brian. It was very like blurry in essence. So I don't know if that works for or against us as viewers trying to watch it.
Yeah, I kind of hate not being able to see up close. I've been using Alex Murdoch as a parallel because it's a current big case, but that one you had cameras all over the place and multiple angles. You could see everything, but this was not that way. It was one static camera shot, and that was it. And like you said, it was kind of blurry and not anything like the Murdoch trial.
No, and they're really small too. So because they had like them in a 4 kind of screens, and I'm like, can't even see anything.
Yeah, and those two attorneys at the bottom were like huge. I was like, who are those people?
I know.
At first, I didn't know what the hell were they, like a court reporter or something, but it wasn't. They were attorneys that weren't there. So. Yeah.
No, the bottom left, if you guys watch it, the bottom left was part of the prosecution. She's his co-counsel, and then the bottom right was Anne's, part of Anne's team. So it was interesting. They were like really close up, and everything else is like far away. You're trying to
it was bizarre. It was bizarre.
But other things that I took away from it, he dismissed the motion to reconsider. He said they were saying that the grand jury got wrong instructions, and so they wanted him to reconsider everything. And then the permission to appeal, which I found really interesting, he denied that.
Yeah, and I thought that was weird. You have to ask for permission to appeal the person you're appealing. Like, that just seemed odd to me. Like, why do you have to ask permission?
Well, and then I don't know if you caught that they were saying that they were trying to change it to beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's what I've always known it to be. But in the state of Idaho, it's probable cause.
Yeah. From everything I had watched, that was a big time long shot. But, they got to do what they can. I'm not going to fault them for that. But I did hear from attorneys that was a long shot that would have ever flown, because the standard is probable cause. And I'm not sure how it differs from state to state. I just know in this particular case that was the standard. So, but, when you had grand jury members saying they wanted to see more evidence,
you're like,
what?
Okay,
then why are you? I don't know. I mean, like you said, it would reasonable doubt. I know that's for the trial, but it just seems crazy to think of this person could be in jail for a couple of years before the trial, and let's say you're found not guilty. Now, granted, that would be awesome for him, and you'd be thankful you're out, but you just lost 2 years of your life. I mean, my gosh, not to mention his career is probably destroyed. I mean, he could probably write one hell of a book or two and probably do okay. But I mean, just put yourself in that situation, right? I mean, who would want to be in jail for 2 years? I mean, it's horrible. So it just seems like there should be a higher standard, that phrase you hear, you could indict a ham sandwich, that's kind of the way it is. I mean, you don't need much of a burden of proof to just be able to indict him, and boom, then you're in jail and you're waiting until it takes. And he passed, he waived his right to a speedy trial. Probably because his attorney's looking at him like, there's no way in hell I can get through any of this stuff in 70 days or whatever that is. So, but to me, I'd almost think that would have been the smarter bet, because then the prosecution would have had to hurry up too. But, it's a gamble, and you're obviously gambling with somebody's life. So I get why he's being more cautious, but you almost wonder if that would have been the smarter bet, is to say, you know what, screw it. I want the speedy trial. Let's do this. I didn't do it, so let's do this,
Right. But. I know that she mentioned the prosecution was arguing for it to be the summer of 2024.
Right.
And then Anne came back and said, no, I'm going to need this trial is going to be at least 12 to 15 weeks long at minimum. And the earliest that she could possibly do it, she was saying, if everything lines up and I get all this discovery, all the witnesses are willing to speak to me, because she said that she was having trouble with them wanting to talk to them.
Right.
and things like that, and all of that gets to her, she could possibly be ready by March 2025.
Right.
But she said that's pushing it. She goes, I'm scared even telling you summer of 2025.
Yeah, it's insane how much stuff they have to go through. But, you know, they need to move this, you know, to a different venue. And I know they've applied for that. But I mean, the idea of having to run a trial around the school schedule is the most asinine thing I've ever heard in my life. I mean, seriously? And it's not going to be done in 6 to 8 weeks like you'd have to have it to fit that. So then what do you do? You know, this needs to be moved to Boise or somewhere that can handle, you know, all the amenities, the hotels, all that stuff they were talking about in the hearing. You know, that would be no problem in Boise if they just did it there, you know.
Have you ever heard of a trial working around a school schedule?
No, I've never heard such a thing. It's ridiculous. And, you know, I get it from the standpoint of parking, hotels, you know, all that stuff. I mean, it's not geared for an event of that scope. I mean, this is going to be off the charts. In a little town like that with a big university, you know, like I said, you've only got so many hotels and restaurants. So I get it, but that's why they just need to move it. And not to mention the fact that that whole town is like incestuous with this university. So, I mean, they just need to move it.
And I feel he'll have a better chance. And they were trying to argue that Thompson got up and he said, oh, well, I have friends that were in Mexico that people knew about the case. And I was in McCall recently on a conference and I, you know, and people were talking, or they were talking about it there. So he's like, it's all over the place. There's no, but I'm like, yeah, but you all know each other in this case, in this town. Like that's the differentiating factor. Like if he goes to another state or another city, he'll have a better chance of everyone not knowing each other and having that interconnecting aspect.
I agree. I mean, even the fact that Judge got a request to be on the jury sent to his house is indicative of the absurdity of this whole thing trying to be done. Yeah, he got some kind of summons or something. I don't remember what I just saw just the other day. And he said to the other attorneys, I assume, you know, that's okay for me not to come to this, you know, and it was just kind of a joke, but I mean, it randomly, he got a request and I thought that was interesting, but yeah, they just need to move this. And, you know, we were talking about too, the Ann Taylor, you know, saying that she has no idea, you know, after all this time, a year and change, has no idea how they arrived at Bryan Kohberger as the suspect here. And to me, that was the big takeaway from that hearing was hearing that, because it's like, how could you be a year plus into this and have no idea of that? So either she's lying, which that seems to be a stretch, or she genuinely doesn't know. And how ridiculous is that? I mean, to me, when you bring somebody up on murder charges, that should be like the first thing that has to be unveiled, is how you determine them to be a suspect. Like I said in a recent video, you know, show the math. Let's see how you got there. Because if you don't have that, then you sure as hell don't have a case to you know, find this person guilty. And how that has not been already divulged is just doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely. And I think that's where it goes to the sealing and unsealing topic. And when we get to that, we'll touch on that. I mean, that's where this is coming from. Right. That's where I think that they're trying to hide stuff because they don't want it unsealed. They want everything sealed. That's where, hence the gag order. I mean, I've never seen it so sealed in my life. You've talked about that countless times in your videos of how, why is everything such a secret? I mean, by this point, we should have the 911 calls. At the very least. Exactly.
And going back to that point, though, about how they found out it was Bryan, I've heard a lot of theories out there. And one of them that definitely, I think, makes me think that this could be it is, you know, the fact that, you know, he had applied to, if not one or both of those police departments, Pullman and Moscow, for internship when he, or some sort of working relationship with his PhD. But I wonder if that's how he got on their radar, this kind of strange, because he, you know, he had some strange characteristics, and that's why, you know, he's an easy person to pin this on, I think. But the fact that he's got the criminology background, he's a little off, a little socially awkward, and that maybe will put him on the radar. And then, you know, once they had him on the radar, you know, maybe brought him in because, you know, they're under the guise of, we think we saw a car that looks like yours in these videos, really just to get an alibi. And when they found out that he didn't really have an alibi, then that's when I think the fix was in, because now they had a guy who kind of fit the oddball, creepy character they wanted to portray, with the criminology background and a car that looks like a car they see in a video. And now they're kind of piecing it all together. And I think they kind of built that story and then had to be able to then adjust the timeline to fit this car in the video. And that's where the 4 o'clock to 4:25 thing comes in. And, you know, like I've talked about in several videos, that I think it was much earlier than that, somewhere in that 2 to 3 range. But, you know, when you look at their timeline, you know, that doesn't work if it's 2 to 3. So, and I think they built the timeline around the car that they're claiming they see, but we know there were multiple Elantras in the area. The car that the cops at Banfield were driving, that car they had, that undercover car, sure looked like an Elantra. None of the stuff we've seen is anything definitive. No license plate, no person you can clearly see, nothing. I mean, it's blurry crap. And there's that one video of the car leaving, going by that mobile gas station at 3:45. That definitely looks like an Elantra, but that would be leaving town at 3:45, which certainly doesn't fit their narrative. But to me, I think that's the car they saw, and I think that's the car that ended up in Eugene, Oregon, trashed, with that woman in Colorado that owned it, that bought it from Dan Estee, the guy who owned the King Road house. I mean, how much crazier do you get than this? I mean, this is the story that keeps on giving. I mean, it's one crazy, weird, creepy thing after another, and that's certainly, I think, very plausible. But that's how I think they got him on the radar. And then, of course, they give the name and the everything to that WSU cop, who then found him at the you know, his car at the parking lot where he lived. But, you know, there were cameras that they had at that apartment complex. But it's interesting, I only saw them mentioned once and never again, because if they had cameras at his apartment complex, then surely we must have a video of him walking to his car, clad in black, with a duffel bag, thrown in the back. Yeah, oh yeah. Well, that's in the duffel bag, Blogger Girl. That's in the duffel bag. And then driving away, and then coming back after he's done in Moscow with, you know, his clothes maybe in a bag. I mean, we got nothing like that. So if there's video at that apartment complex, then to me, that would be the damning video. But as I mentioned in another video of mine, it's amazing. We've got all these supposed video of him on all these little doorbell cameras and stuff, but at the beginning and the end of the journey, we don't have it. And to me, that's very suspicious. That house next door had the perfect angle. You could see a car coming into Queen Road. Yep. And that video is, I mean, that's the one that Kaylee's sister got a hold of. But, you know, they don't have any, that I'm aware of, any cars that fit any of these descriptions coming in there. We haven't seen any of it. You know, it's all hush hush. No. So just so many rabbit holes with this one. So
Absolutely.
But anything else on the hearing you wanted to bring up before we move on?
Just a couple of stats. She talked about 400 witnesses, and I found that, I was like, wow, that's a lot of people.
Right.
And then she said that there's an extra 9,000 tips that she received on January 4th that she still has to go through. And let me see. I think the ending of it was judge said that he's gonna consider the timeline of when they're gonna do the trial. He didn't actually decide on that.
Right.
But he's gonna think about it. But he was contemplating. He says, I'm stuck in a hard place because on one side, I want to make sure that the victims are getting, meaning I think he was referring to the families, not the kids, that they should have a speedier trial and things should move along. But at the same time, you have Brian's life at stake, so he has to balance that aspect of it and giving the time for them to do a proper defense for him. So she talked about 51 terabytes of information that they have to go through. Just to put that in perspective, she gave a stat. She said this was from Dropbox.com. 1 terabyte is equal to 250,000 pictures, 500 hours of high definition video, 6.5 million documents, or 1,300 filing cabinets. That's just 1 terabyte, and they have 51 of them. So times that by 51, and that's what they've got to go through.
That's unbelievable.
In a year. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. So yeah, that's unreal, and definitely they get their work cut out for them here with this one. That's for sure. All right. Well, how about some cowboy cops here? I know Drip Drop on Crime Circus was the one that first showed this stuff of those cops or whoever coming out of the house in just plain clothes, cowboy hats. That's why they called them the cowboy cops, getting in a van. The media was out there, and they wouldn't talk to him. They just got in the van. But what do you make of all that?
Well, for people who maybe haven't seen it yet, if you haven't, it's definitely online, so you can just kind of type in. Trip Drop called them cowboys because they were wearing cowboy hats. But if you look at it, there was these people, I want to say 4 or 5 guys that went in the house in the middle of the night. The news crews were there, and they caught them going in and out. And you can kind of see the footage, a little bit of them walking around the house. Only one of them had gloves on. Again, the PP&E issue where I'm like, what are you doing? Now, the scene had already been processed at that point, but still, you should still be using proper PP&E, in my opinion. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, there should be nobody going in there because just because they collected evidence doesn't mean they're not going to be like, oh, shoot, we didn't check this, or, that we found out this bit of information, so we better go back and look at this. So yeah, I mean that thing should have been. They should have all been in Tyvek. They should have been accounted for. So I wonder if they were FBI or Idaho State Police. I mean, we don't have any idea who they are.
But that, to me, that should even be held to a higher standard because if they're a higher entity like state or FBI, they know better. Right. They know that they should be doing things. I mean, this small town's one thing. Maybe they haven't had this type of case. I mean, they hadn't had a murder in 7 years, according to them. Right. That's a whole nother topic. And, but the fact that, they're higher entities, they know better, they have higher standards, or they should. Why are they just walking in? I mean, they said that they checked in with the officer that was there at the property and then went in. So obviously they had permission to go into the property. Right. But they're still not following a proper protocol, covering themselves.
No, you're exactly
and what did they take?
Right.
And did you see that? And someone else had pointed this out, a different creator. I think it was Drip Drop, where he pointed out that one of the guys that was he had something in his hand. It would look like blackish.
Yeah, I couldn't tell, but it was definitely something in his hand.
Absolutely. And I was like, "Oh, wow, okay."
I couldn't tell if it was his.
Slowed it down.
I couldn't tell if it was his gloves or something like that, or if it was something maybe more than that. I don't know. It was quick and it was blurry, but I know Drip Drop zoomed in. If I remember, I will link to that episode of Drip Drops in the description below.
Definitely.
So you guys can check that out because that was a good one. And Drip Drop's not for everybody, but I really like him. He's very unique. He's unique, and his delivery is different. And so yeah, I think he's got some good stuff. But yeah, that was just really weird.
And it wouldn't talk to the media. The media was
Right.
trying to talk to them the whole time, and they wouldn't say anything. It was just super bizarre. There was like a caravan. It wasn't just one van. It was like 2 or potentially 3 cars. And why do you need that many people if you're just picking up 1 or 2 things from the property?
Yeah, and I wonder if anybody got the plate numbers and stuff, because you could see if it was government issued and maybe could help determine where at least they were coming from, but I don't know.
I think he said it was 2 different plates, 2 different states.
Interesting.
Plates. So,
Okay. Interesting.
go figure.
Interesting. All right. Well, what about the sealing and the unsealing of this? Where'd you want to talk about there?
I think that there's a reason. I think Brian wants it out, and I agree with him in that instance that he's like, okay, at this point, I want people to see what is there so that they can make their own judgment. And they're trying to keep it super hush hush. And for me, I look at it like, well, if you have a solid case against somebody, holding back, unless it's like certain details that you only want coming out in trial. But the whole thing has been hush hush. It's not just parts of it.
Right.
So that was very different for me, and I wanted to get your take on it too.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I had heard that it was the defense that first wanted it sealed up because of the fact that, the people would hear about it and it would taint the jury pool. Of course, we all know that jury pool was tainted before this trial even started, or any of this case even started. But then I had heard the flip side, that it was the prosecution. Now we're hearing that, Brian wants it unsealed, but now the prosecution's pushing back. So I've been hearing lots of different things. I'm not really sure what's true. And that's the problem with this case, is there's so much stuff out there and there's so much crap out there that we just don't know. At sometimes I'm like, wait a minute, is that a fact or is that just a rumor? And then I'm like, where did I hear that from? And then it's like impossible to try to find it again, just like when I brought up that film class shooting that video of that house. Crazy how coincidental that was. But I started to second guess myself of, am I getting this case like mixed up with something else, because Murder Metal Mayhem, we're doing a new case every week. So, I mean, it's relentless pace. So, I mean, I'm hearing about so much stuff. It's just unbelievable. So yeah, I'm not really sure about that. I don't know who started it, but I think it should be unsealed. I think we should see everything. I mean, again, allude to the Murdoch trial. I mean, your 911 call, you had 3 different police interrogations, which was fascinating. I watched some of the body and language analysis of that stuff. Really, really cool information. And we don't have any of that stuff. I mean, they've even said they didn't record at least the interview with Brian, which, how is that? I mean, I've never heard of a case involving a quadruple murder at that they didn't videotape the police interrogation or interview with him. I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah, I agree. And then letting him drive around to Pennsylvania and not bringing him in for questioning. I mean, I've always seen officers bring them in at least to get a DNA swab and to just rule them out, if anything.
Right.
And they didn't do that here, and I found that super bizarre.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't get his DNA in Idaho, but then I've also heard some suspect that they had to go out there to get the DNA from his family so that then they could then have their source for that sheath, and then that's how that all came about. But I'm not sure about that. I haven't looked at like the timetable of how that all went down. But nothing would surprise me here. Nothing would. And even the accounts of him in Pennsylvania with gloves on, sorting through trash, that was only told by the DA out there who has got another shady bunch of nonsense with him. So I don't really fully believe him. And that's the only proof that we have of that, just like Brian Enton said that, Brian Koberger asked, did you arrest anybody else, and some have questioned, did that really happen, so you know, to make him sound all kooky with, you know, gloves and going through garbage. I don't understand what that would have gained him, because anybody in that house would have linked back to him. You know, it's not like
Right.
he was doing this at a dorm or something like that. This was his family's house. So I just don't, for the life of me, understand what even he would gain by separating his garbage from theirs. But anyway, that was the story. But I, you know, again, with everything with this case, I doubt it, only because of how shady everything has been with it. It doesn't make any sense why they would have let him drive 2,500 miles across the country. If they thought he did what they say he did, how in the hell are you going to let him drive across the country? I don't care that you're tailing him or what. That just very risky. I mean, anything could have happened there, you know, so.
Well, and he poses a threat to society if he's just killed 4 people and they're just going to let him drive around. Okay. So, just on one topic, it's kind of a subtopic, but the touch DNA, I know we talked about prior. I just wanted to point that out, that I had watched a video of an expert in touch DNA.
Yeah.
And he gave an analogy about how that even comes on to be on an item. And just to put it in perspective for people who maybe don't understand or don't know what it is really, because I didn't really understand. I've never seen it used in a case, and I think this is the first time it's being used as the main evidence in a case.
Right.
But they were talking about, now we both talked about this because you made a comparison of like sending the shirt to me. Your DNA is on that now. And I basically gave the example, and I think girls will relate to this, is like if you go to Home Goods, right? Let's say you go in and you touch a pillow or you touch blankets. Yeah, and you're touching it. And then someone takes that pillow home, puts it on their couch, and then gets murdered the next day. Your DNA is now on their couch. And that's what touch DNA is.
Exactly.
But you never had any affiliation with that person. You've never met them. You've never been in their home. But now your DNA is at the crime scene.
Exactly.
So
and that's why it's unreliable. And I've heard it equated to like a lie detector test. It's not admissible. It's only a tool that investigators can use to help figure out if they're on the right track. Not supposed to be made into evidence. And that's why it wasn't in the PCA, because it's just bogus. But here everybody's hanging their hat on it. I see commenters, and I'm sure we'll get them on this video, that are like, oh, he's guilty. His DNA. And it's like, yeah, but if you do the research, it's not the same as, you know, you're thinking like blood evidence or, you know, semen or something like that. This is just like a skin cell. That's how small.
Yeah.
I've heard it. Somebody I watched said, you know, they have to have, I think, 500 markers on a DNA sample to be legit. And this one they've got is 90. So that's how small it is.
Wow.
It's so far
Not even a
under
fifth.
the threshold for what they would call like legit. So it's just blindly guessing. There's not much science in it at that point. So for all of you out there that think that the DNA evidence is the be-all, end-all in this case, I'm sorry to tell you, it's really not. And the fact that, you know, it can't live on brass for more than 4 hours, I mean, that right there means that stuff is absolutely worthless to me. I'm not buying any of it. And, you know, the other thing that I wonder if everything's sealed up is if anybody's involved in this as a confidential informant, that could be another possibility of why they're trying to protect somebody, you know, because there was a huge drug bust a month after this happened in that area. And it involved multiple states, Idaho, Washington, and Arizona. And there were some big players that went down in that. And I have to wonder, could it have possibly had something to do with this case? I don't know that. I'm just saying, could it have? And maybe that's why they're protecting people, because they obviously, if they were involved in, let's say, both and knew something about both of those cases, maybe that might be a reason to keep things under wraps. But I just don't know. I mean, that's the thing. We really don't. We're just kind of guessing.
No, we don't. And we're not pro Brian Kohberger. I just want us to make that clear. And I think
not at all.
People might get the misconception, but I just want to clear that up for viewers that we're not pro Brian. we're going where the facts are and what is making sense to us as human beings. And this just does not make sense.
No.
This is scary for every one of us if we, God forbid, we're ever in that situation. But
Right.
I mean,
yeah, your scenario about your scenario about the pillow or mine about the t-shirt. I mean, those are real. That could happen to any one of us here, you guys watching this, and that should scare the crap out of you and would make you want to have that higher bar, especially if you're facing a firing squad over it. So,
oh my God. Scary.
Now the last thing we wanted to talk about with you guys is the theory that I had come up with in a video I did. I'll link to that in the description. That video keeps getting a lot of views. I know it's been replayed on lots of different channels, but my lambs to the slaughter theory, and I know Blogger Girl, you've seen the video, and I've gotten a lot of interesting comments about it. A lot of people really think it seems pretty plausible. But what did you think about it?
I agree. I think a lot of it makes sense to me, that Maddie flushing the drugs to, you know, everyone watching them throughout the evening, whether it be, you know, the girls watching Zan and Ethan, letting everybody know when they're home, to Eric Gower driving them home, to Jack Showalter watching them and walking them to the grub truck,
right,
to potentially anybody in the corner club keeping an eye on them, in that essence, mainly probably Jack.
Right.
And then them leaving, like Jack leaving to potentially, supposedly leaving to like Africa right after. I mean, I could understand for his own safety, you probably like bye,
right,
if he's involved in that. So I mean,
the thing is, the way I came up with that theory, I've put out videos about the drug angle. I put them out about the frat boys. I put it, and as I went through all of those, I'm just like, as I did each video, I'm like, well, wait a minute. How does this happen and that happen at the same time? Because there's so much shadiness in all of those different angles that I started to wonder, is it possible that it could have been all of the above? And I know, you hear about that Occam's razor principle, the simplest explanation is usually the best. And I get it that seems almost unbelievable that many people could have been involved in this, but I just think that it seems very plausible. So in the Lambs to the Slaughter theory, I thought, well, you got Xana and Ethan at the Sigma Chi party, and was Bethany maybe part of this? So she was keeping an eye on them because she was at the party. And then Kaylee and Maddie are at the corner club, as you mentioned, and Jack Showalter, who apparently was there to keep an eye on him. Maddie's boyfriend had asked him to keep an eye on him because he was out of town. And they were drinking. So that's somewhat of a legit reason why he would have been hanging around. However, that's also very convenient that then they've got somebody kind of keeping tabs on them. And then he's walking them to the grub truck. And then, like you said, then Eric Gower picks them up as the private driver. So then I'm like, boy, are all these people actually involved, And then, you've got, which I think drugs is at the root of this entire fiasco. And, that we've heard the name Emma Bailey and Demetrius floated around, and those two were, involved in dealing drugs. They got in a mess over in Washington with an overdose that miraculously they both just kind of skipped town, and that was okay. So that typically means somebody was an informant of some sort. So you've got them possibly involved. And, I know that Harsh, when he talked about my Lambs to the Slaughter video, he's, kept using the term cartel. And I know that people think the cartel is, this huge organization in Mexico, which they are, but there's also mid-level people. And that's who I think did this. I don't think they were like people flown in from Mexico to do it. I think they were mid-level people that were pissed off that she flushed a lot of product down the toilet, and they were coming there to take care of business. And I honestly think that those 4 people were brought to that house at that time where there was nobody around. I mean, you got this big party house and miraculously nobody's there. And
Yeah.
that's why I think Dylan was the one designated to stay at the house to keep people away. And then she, I think, was the one that kind of called somebody and says, okay, they're all here. They're in their room. They're in their room. And I'm out. And she leaves out that sliding glass door, leaves it unlocked. And then they come in and do what they did. And I firmly believe that if Dylan and Bethany were there at that house when when it started, they left in a hurry and probably didn't come back till the morning. And I bet they were told, don't call 911 until noon. And that's why I think they called, or the call was made right before noon. They wanted to get a big head start. Like I said, I think that one Elantra was taken to Oregon, and I think that they wanted to get a big head start. They didn't want anybody chasing after them, and that's why I think you got that long delay, and possibly, too, moving product. Maybe they had some hidden stuff in the house, don't know, but it's certainly possible. But I think there was some kind of cleanup involved, maybe to make it look different than what it really was. We know there was that latent shoe print in front of Dylan's room with no real explanation of how that got there. But I honestly think that all of these people were conspiring to do this. I mean, it's horrible to think of it, but we know Dylan brought Kaylee back as her +1 for that Friday party. And boy, isn't that awfully convenient that she invites her back on a weekend where that happens. So, that.
And she had just moved out. She just moved out. So why are you having her come back?
And she was moving to Texas, so so I think, to me, that's the big part of the theory is multiple people involved. Do I think all of those people committed the act? No. I think that there were probably 3 or 4 people that did that, but then you had the 2 insiders, maybe a couple of people outside, which is maybe where the frat boys come in, a lookout, a driver, all these people had to play a role. And I think that to me seems like the most feasible way, because I know that, in my opinion, there's no way one person is doing this and not leaving anything left behind but a speck of DNA, very suspect DNA on a knife sheath. So, but yeah, that's the slaughter video, Lamps of the Slaughter theory. So you guys can check it out if you haven't already watched it. I'll link to it. You guys can see
Definitely check it out, guys. It's really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I definitely, it was cool to do this video with you, and I'm glad that you won the contest. And you got a Murder Metal Mayhem t-shirt, right? You got stickers.
I did.
And I sent you a couple of books even. So you got a little care package there.
I hope you can kind of see it.
Oh,
awesome. Go in and out.
Yeah, it's going in and out a little bit, but that's awesome. So yeah, so we'll do more contests like this, guys. If you like contests, I love contests. We do them a lot on the podcast. So we'll do more of these and give stuff away. I like doing that sort of thing. So, but appreciate you coming on with me, and we appreciate you guys watching. Comment below and let us know what you think about our conversation here. I'm sure you guys will have some thoughts, and we'll see you next time.